This is Friedrich again. It is nighttime, 1 o'clock a.m., and I'm quite tired, but nevertheless, maybe that is good to be in the state, not to have too much thinking about reasonable arguments, because the reasonable arguments were not without contradiction. And this is my children time, my childhood, and my youth. And it is something really had happened, and is something that I myself thought is from the old-timers. They had been real interesting people. I mean it interesting in the good sense. There could be others. I was warned, but there was some pre-selection. Therefore, I was only allowed as a young child, to be with people, my two mothers, those are in the time before I was born, being taken on this photograph. But it is important, you understand, this is for me myself something I understood from the old-timers. And those were very careful what to tell, because in the old days you had to be sensible. And I myself understood later. I would be explained, and this is a detective work, because I stumbled, this is the 11th, this as a proof. That is German and police reports, that you understand it is really something developing. And there is definition of gypsies. Those live quite distributed around the world and have no fixed place where they have their only home. Of course, the home was with them, but not always. Some were travelers at sea, and then even by foot or on horseback. And those, then when I was born, this was, someone should know, I was put in the record in 1968. But it was most likely 1 year before, and that was not explained. As I said, this is then in the dictionary, a gypsy, in German Zigeuner, and those coming from Russia don't like the word Zigeuner because it remembers something like a bug, like someone not wanted, some pest. But differences were explained to me. By those I was allowed to travel. Therefore I think there was a good pre-selection. I survived. And this is no joke. I have to look into it, because those people were not really those having lived here. This is something reflecting the First Nations in America. But the time of turmoil, where there had been war between the so-called Indians and the new settlers, those who had seen something of it, those old-timers, were then, maybe 1910, there had been fights. There had been still military fighting, not very, very often and very much, but it was still there. And there were eyewitnesses or children having heard it firsthand. Therefore, I was in the companion of people from of old. And this is not necessarily on one side. It was strange. I was somewhere. I was not explained as a young child with 3 or 4 years. My parents are no gypsies. And this is not the case, but there had been relationships, most likely working relationships. And it had been a little bit different than people think about a relationship between the boss and the workers. It must have been different. That I understood, not that it was taught to me, that it was there was no plan. There were other plans. I explained it in the other videos that the ambition was to bring me in the old diplomatic networks, because my father couldn't do it himself. But there were people, and me as a child, I was detecting the world and understood there were interesting people. And then I understood there was the ambition to bring me in the network of diplomats and merchants. This was alongside at the so-called proxy points, or the networking megacities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York. There had been bankers traveling, and there had been the transport men, like salesmen and so on, transporting goods or being messengers. And there had been then people looking for new jobs. And those were still on the move, and the time had become different. There were extra turmoil times, shifting times, even more than in the ordinary ups and downs of history. Because of the World War, there were people afterward traveling to other countries, and mostly from Bohemia. I understood people and from the eastern parts of Germany or Poland or Russia. Those I met, and I did not fully understand. Sometimes those were working with police, being specialists like tracing specialists, or specialists in survival, or other special abilities. I wasn't explained, and this is not prepared. If you're interested, please think about helping me. This is that you can later not say, "Why didn't you ask me?" If this is coming out good, this is not necessarily the case. I tried it before, and I tried it again and again to find out things, and then was unexpected stumbling. And this I wrote down. Maybe it is not there anymore because money is running out. Or you can find it if that is still online. And this is sad, of course. Money never was run out. in the old days, because there was a network, and I'm not a loser. I'm someone who was ordered not to go to the wrong crowd, and try to do it the way of old. The new time then was having a better backbone, and that was then law and order. There are still people thinking if you tried the honest way, then you will never get what is yours. And this is the old suspicion. And till now, the other side had more according to what they calculated. And I don't know, this is the biggest problem, what is there? There were rumors, and if you hear the legends or follow them, you come to the point, this is like Hans im Glück, like the boy in the fairy tale who is having a goose, and then he's exchanging it to other things, and at the end he's having a lump of gold in his hands. Not that Hans had then gotten it without work, but I think there must have been my grandfather, not a lucky man, but his whole surrounding was working. He was the chief, and then there was a network of people, and it was the time of industrialization. And my grandfather is not the only one, but it is not sure if he had been a chief or the owner. And this was disguised for reasons. And then there had been other ancestors. And why is it important to believe that law and order is doing regulation? It is because trying it the other way would then forfeit it, even by law and order. Therefore, first, there is the basis to be found. And thinking like a detective, there could be people still thinking about having asked me being a child, and this is legally not possible. But I can remember being asked if I wanted to have that and that, and I was trained to say rather not to get into a trap. Because being asked and then people thinking you have something that could give reasons, could have given reasons to do something to me. But there was then the saying law and order is having the regulation. And later asking, there was only fairy tales, only rumors. And at my time, there was not the possibility to look at pictures. The internet was not there, and I couldn't look at pictures. I only had the travelsman, and those talked about the old days. And the old days went back to about 1800. Those were their forefathers, of course, and maybe the people then had been born 1890 and then 1980. Those were 90 years old. And I met some of them. And there were even people from the Civil War. And understood people are telling the stories from of old. And there are fairy tales. And then, of course, the time is destroying things. And I did not know as a boy that there had been, so for example, stock market till then, that you cannot destroy things. It is only that people are destroyed. Therefore, the first I was ordered is to stay safe. And I still want to be safe. Therefore, don't expect me to demand people to give something to me, because law and order is already there. And I heard people saying, if there is no one in the ancestry, then it will distribute it anew. And then around 1980, I myself said, and I gave it into writing, that I myself could be an ancestor. No, someone in the follow. Or is it, what is Nachfahre in Deutsch? Das ist die Frage. Ich bin natürlich Nachfahre. And this is in English, to raise awareness. It is in English not something legal, because that was the catching ideas, I think. People asking me as a young boy if I wanted something, and it was not even explained where it is. And I always said, I want to go home. This is not my country, because my parents are not living there. And this, of course, came as something I understood. If I would have said yes, it would have been dangerous. And it was quite sometimes that there were stories. And there was no papa, no father there. And I didn't understand what the legality of everything would be. Now understanding this is not right. You have to be asked when you are adult, when you are yourself of age, to decide. I ran into adulthood, was about about that age. Not exactly, but I need legal grounds to understand. I now get the idea, and this of course is something where the stories hinted to the possibility that it had been from time to time that if people did not want to give it to someone, it was not explained. I heard mayors and leading politicians asking if this or that man had come back from the war. And this was quite a lot of times. I heard it, is he still in the war? In German, ist er noch im Krieg oder ist er schon zurückgekommen? This is a topic where most people had the German tongue. It is not necessarily that those were citizens of a country or not. And I myself felt at home with the people who understood me. And this, sad enough, was not where I'm living right now. And this was a stark contrast. Normally you won't tell about it. But it was that contrast that even the teachers at the school I was attending gave me a bad name. It looked like I was not even able to write and read right. And this was, my people are somewhere else. Not, of course, it was not wanted. But what can you do about it? I can remember I had been some days before in a region having without pay an orphan's right. Me as the orphan of war, the elder invited, mostly fathers themselves. My father was left not in combat, but it is said, left in combat. He was left in the war, and he did not return. But important was, I had my people. We understood each other, and those were travelsmen, and those were Indians and Gypsies and seamen, and mostly it was not important if those were of this nationality or others. This nationality then was given because you get one. But I'm now feeling pressed to explain it is not my nationality it was given me. There is something wrong. There is wrong a file. What is it? A file record? And this is because political pressure from the Nazi era. And this is not an invention, this is really the case. The people were sometimes not talking at all about it. But when there was talk, and me as a child, and I was really a young child, sitting there and listening, and it was quite some hours. I listened. I didn't understand everything. Sometimes the language was different, but mostly German, and even abroad. Then I understood, yes, at that time there was quite a loss. He is not there anymore, and is there someone still alive? And when I then once heard there was a look for Fritz, I understood this is my father. Abroad I was allowed, of course I was allowed to talk, but I was very cautious. I learned to trust people, or the right ones, but it was, of course, a pre-selection. Therefore, I wouldn't do it with my child to send him away, as it was done with me. But this is not to put any accusations against anyone, but it was a time where there was follow-up of the Nazi era. And then there was me saying, I want to have it. I had to be cautious, therefore I said it when the others were not there, because I understood those had something strange. I was not explained things. My mother said, don't say anything. My mother was left at home, she couldn't travel anymore, or she wasn't being sure it was safe. There was the time, and this is for those who are now a little bit older themselves, who understand that it was not explained for security reasons. Do not intermingle into those affairs if you're not yourself stressed to say something, don't say. But with me it is now that some people knew even the fathers of my forefathers. I myself had met someone who said, I'm no Karl. And the other said, no, he says so, but he is not your real grandfather. He is someone who was very close. And then I had, like a detective, asking at home, but it was not 100% sure because my remembrance 2 days or 2 weeks after the incident was of course good. Otherwise, I would not have sent on the voyages as a helper. And this really is true. I was there, not that I was paid, but I got the chance to be with an elder, with someone in the character of a father. And this was not always the same. But he was responsible, or he gave over the responsibility to even someone else. And I was taken care for. It was not that I got into trouble, but I saw others who had been into trouble. And when being at home, I understood in other countries you cannot help people. I saw the classes in India, and I was there then in the garments. There is not a garment in India, but if you dress the way the people there, then you are in less danger as wearing the visitors' clothes, the European clothes. And this was the duty of my hosts, of those taking me alongside. And my mother said this was done with her when she was at that age. And this was done to give experiences. But she said it is not as good as it had been. Now, she was glad I was still there, and nothing had happened. I was sick abroad, but this was considered as the, I don't know if you might say, as the necessary dangers of life. If you stay at home, of course, in a cage, nothing will happen. But I was given the opportunity to. Now I wouldn't do it again with my child, because I have remembrances, and those are strange. That it was dangerous. It was dangerous, and it was then. It was maybe. Officially, I was put in the record 68, and I now recognize the face of a woman. She said, "I myself am not. I'm near to an Aborigines. I'm near to a First Nation, and even being less than a year before talking, of course, you understand." And how this is done, I don't know. I can remember there was first, before I said anything, give a sign if you need something, if you can't swallow, and so on. I was somehow specially cared, but I didn't know at that time. You later learn how others are raised. And Mrs. It must have been, yes, she said, the second wife, Celine Marshall, and she said there was something like military. Maybe you will later learn that your grandfather, but she did not know if he was the one who had the business trips to look for workers. And when he bought, then it was accustomed to buy a man as a slave. He didn't give them the opportunity to work for him as a free man. I don't know if it was the reason to be more reliable, or but most likely in his culture. But I cannot say it for sure. Why? But it must have been the father of my grandfather. I don't think that the grandfather himself, but it could have been. If the grandfather was if my own father was around 1860, then of course 1840 could have been. And then there was the industrialization, maybe from 60 to 1900. And then there was the conflict in Europe, and that gave difficulties, and the grandfather couldn't travel anymore. He had an injury, and this is oral tradition, but it was not only from one side. Therefore, the injury is sure. And even that there had been surgeons, especially coming to treat him, this was sure information as well. But the other things were not communicated for security reasons. But now, being in the danger to be molested again, this is now 2024, there is molestation. I understand this is something difficult to be proven, because it is sold, it is given as something necessary. And this is, of course, the idea of this part of the world. In other parts, it would be ridiculous to give someone an unnecessary effort. You wouldn't do it. There is a need for income, and if the income is not possible, then give him a loan or give him what I now expect. People already know it should be mine, in my hands. And I never wanted to be someone who give away, but there was war. And this was something that put it out of reach. And then I myself asked from 1980 on, around, then you stop, of course, if there is nothing. There was asking. I'm quite sure it is not possible to say I did not want to have it. It was rather that there is the pushing of the scapegoat. The buck stops here. That means it is not possible to move it farther. And I have no one to accuse, because I think if there is a plan, the trick is to disguise, to forget that you cannot see where something is. And this is not only one side, because the war put under a whale at least three. This is Karl, then there is Victoria Louise, and this, of course, is not even it is not sure at all. It is my conclusion that this is my mother herself. And even that was veiled. I recognize the face, but was she in America at the time, or was she in South Africa? Or was she even in South Africa and then with a helicopter? Because I was then said it was an expensive flight. What flight? And it was not even allowed to fly that far. But how can a helicopter fly from South Africa to America? No, this is much too far. Or is it possible? And that is something you will never find out. If people do not want to say, they don't. Because it is often from the lips of gypsies. Gypsies are not negative in my eyes. There are some who are, of course, like with others, but it is travelsmen, or even not bankers, but something like management, traveling management, like someone looking for a good network controllers. And those had been different, very different. There is not a box for a travelsman. It is very much different. There is each one an own character. But when I heard about interest from of the time from of old, or in the time from of old, there was unbelief that but someone said, yes, he was having a son who was that sensible as well. And sensibility was good, because a detective must be sensible. There were other people from other character, or of another character, and I don't talk English too good, but it was the same with the others. Therefore, I heard Frenchmen explaining me a thing, and I did not fully understand. I talk quite good in comparison to, for example, a Chinese, but he's putting hands in and gestures, and Spanish and Portuguese and so on sometimes do not talk much. If you are a travelsman, sometimes you are there to row a boat, not necessarily rowing a boat over the ocean, but you understand, a sailor is there to work. I was myself as a child on a boat, and why was that given me as an opportunity? It could be something like training, because gypsies, my grandfather was not, but he was working with them, okay? It is for you that you understand the interesting people were in his company or had been in his company. Gypsies, of course, are seamen, not the same. But they got along. They had to, or otherwise some was not. There was some regulation, and when there had been a vessel, it was not recreation. They was asking, can he travel with you? And it was to give me training. And this, of course, is something it was given as an option. No one can say if I stay healthy enough, but I am. If you lose a leg, you, of course, then not a good sailor anymore. Maybe you can do it nevertheless. Or if someone had an accident, losing his brain or the capability of his brain. But I never did so. It was rather that I understand where is law and order. This had been with a war a problem. It was put out of reach. It still is there, but then the people who were interested were then dead, dying one after the other. If you are 80 years old, you know that you may be 10, 20 years, and then you are no more. And there was, of course, lamentation. It is taking too long. And then it is dangerous. If you have to work as a stuntman, I heard one after the other having an accident. And it is quite true. Or the one-hand sailors, the alone sailing people. They did it then for television sometimes. It had not been for myself that I got to be introduced, or I was introduced to new, maybe mountaineers, to new records. Record breakers, Rekordbrecher kann man nicht sagen, you can't say it, but it is important that I do it in English. And of course I'm not ashamed. It is not about my language that you get a new understanding of English, that you're getting a new understanding of English. It is that I have someone who has insight himself. Who is Carl? It was in fairy tales. And now, from the time asking, I have the idea people are interested in the nobility topic, but what was interesting for me was not nobility. Nobility was interestingly enough because there had been then something like stockholders. But or politicians, the chief of politicians. But this was maybe in the British system. French system was there, still there, and Spanish, not that much. There was civil war there. And I was, as a child, if you understand, I'm not too much interested. I had to take care of my safety. And then there was the constant talking about voyages to the moon. And for me now it is to explain that I take the opportunity of the internet This is my mother. You might see it again. This is me. This was on the sideline. There was no training. It was doing it because people wanted to play something. You have no training to be in a movie. It is something. I think half of the work is done by the technicians, cameraman, and the cutters. There is something with my mother. She was raised closer to the war, and the time was changing into better circumstances, but it was not the case that the war or the aftermath had fully be forgotten. And before it was that the last ruins, the last rubble of the bombing was moved away and new houses were built, that then the new wave of immigrants from their own war zones was moving in. And this was on the sideline as well. This show Father Knows Best. This was the pattern that we had different perspectives. And it was no asking if I was wanting to have it or not. It was there. And this is something I was shown once. And then if you have time, when you're growing older, then maybe look especially at this entry, if you're interested then in your forefathers. But no understanding, it is important to understand I will not get at the answer why people were that interested in me. Those were interested because my forefathers had been giving them work. Yes, really, giving them work and a meaning in life. A seaman cannot travel the sea. He's thinking it is going as it had been, and this was not even a topic. This I found now because stumbling across my mother. I looked at every topic on the internet. There was something said about, or I can remember it was something said about. This is from our own album. This is from the internet. And then I remember there was asking, do you want to be in a reenactment and play Custer, General Custer? And it was a saying, he could be one of your forefathers, but that does not make him a forefather. And it was not that important. It was said on the sideline. This is Mama with me myself, for people to recognize me. This was Papa. And he was looking happy, but he was not. I was raised to be an honest man, and I can, of course, be in the advertisement and tell this family a success. And it was because we were sticking together. But it was not because everyone was looking ahead that times will grow better. This was something I still can remember. Please do not look that sad. Say cheese. And therefore I look that stupid. And this was without saying me look nice. And this is for passport. And that was really something we did at home to not spend money for a hairdresser. And I'm still doing that, not because I want to be also ich will ja nicht knickerig sein. I do not want to be someone, a penny holder, not to give a hairdresser something, but it is that I'm still looking I was not looking, I was working, but then I was put out of the working business in a retraining. I had to retrain to understand new technology. The networking, it was not that interested. I thought it would be more of interest. Internet technology, no, information technology. And it is not that much extra. It is as you would expect it. Information is put in packets, and then it is packet-based, sent around the world, and there is regulation and so on. This is Papa at the time where he had to go to war, and then there was in the newspaper gefallen für Führer, Freund und Vaterland, fallen for the Führer, for the people, and for the motherland. Of course, something I was very glad never to have experienced myself. This I found on the internet because I was looking for someone where at a special place there is a memorial. There is a memorial, and there is the so-called Bürgerpark, but it is not enough, my mother said, and it was on the sideline. And I don't know how much there is still somewhere expected to be fulfilled. And when I said in English, it is enough because more, if I say more in German, it is a speculation to fill out the gaps. This is something I found because I looked for it, and strange enough, I never saw the picture before. And there were different eyewitness reports, not first-hand. One said it was very fast. There was the disarmament, the putting away of the weapons from the German side, and then there was invitation and quick ordering, one said, and the other said there was negotiations before, but it was somewhere else, and then there was this and that. And officially, it is of course a story you can look up yourself. The Treaty of Versailles, 1919. And my mother said, this is my mother, oh sorry, she herself had not believed that my father, her then husband, said he was on a picture. A painter was making sketches about it and then put it in colors as a contract work. And maybe it is in the US somewhere. Of course, I could explain it in German, but then I would fill in what I found on the internet. I had it myself only from those from of old, not from history teachers. This is a photograph being taken when there was not festivity. It was rather cookies. It was a special occasion where there was then Kuchen. And those who lived in the 70s still had experienced it themselves. Not too often, but it was the style where there was work. In the garden, we had no animals ourselves. This is not with farmland. It was rather a lifestyle where my mother was looking for a healthy upbringing. But it was not very luxurious, not very much. This is me, the first picture I found, and of course I was never explained why there are no baby pictures. First of all, there was not too much money. And then I remember it was put together quick and dirty. There were photographs, and then an aunt came and put those together and wrote stories to it. I understood there was something where I should have such an album, that I have some remembrances, but is it the real history? I now understand in part. This is me, but why was I brought to the hospital and then taken back? I still can remember myself, and it was never spoken about it. I wanted to, but it was something where people said, or my mother even said, oh no, not later people will tell you. Therefore, please, it is for you, if you had been born before 1970, yes, 1970 or before 1975, you will understand it was a time where there was quietness quite often, not because it wasn't allowed to tell, but it was unnecessary. And there was no time. There was work, there was planning, housework, and of course schoolwork was very important. And for me then there was the extra demand to help my mother. And this was because there were difficulties for her, and I could help. This is the painting where by oral tradition, we did not have it at home, by oral tradition my mother said, this was the father, and he was, when he was having duty, he was having another hair color. Like the seaman being at sea, then the salty water would then lighten the hair. And it was interesting, people telling about nearly everything, and then there was no asking if it is important or not. For me it is something I can now put together to understand if there had been something extraordinary. This was strange because my mother was saying he wants to do something, but my mother was wanting me to follow her and not the ideas of an unknown. And the others are not talking about it. Maybe it was nothing, and it is only that my mother said it. This is my mother in this circumstance. Mama, this is someone unknown. This was then my own trying to feed myself. Night shift. It is very important that I have expectations to understand my own rights. There had always been the asking to do something for else. This was me from the year maybe 1985 on. Then I was growing a beard. And this was much before, 68. And if you look at it, I must have been older than 2 or 3 months. I can remember quite a lot before, and when I tried to talk about it, it was said, oh, you're having dreams. And I was reading a lot from the age of 6 years old. I was reading. We had no television, and there was always a book. And it was from the library, and there were many series, like Detective Kim, this was playing in Denmark, or of course the Three Investigators, or of course Anne Blyton and so on. There was several series like Secret Seven and Famous Five, and there was something like with a bird, with a parrot. And then there were of course the Indian stories, quite a lot of it. And I was then, when there was housework and so on, asking if this was true or not. Therefore, I had the possibility to ask the two mothers about right or wrong. Now, this is Mama, the two mothers. My Mama both mothers, both breastfeeding me, and she did more than the elder, of course. I was never explained if this was ordinary, that both had to carry. I thought because my mother was that old. She was lucky that my mother was child-loving in nature herself. But I think my mother needed help, and my mother gave something that my mother could bring me to life. But this is for others maybe interesting. Now I'm understanding why it was not talked too much about. This is something I don't know. It looks like my mother, but maybe she was someone, but not at that occasion. This is the photograph. I'm not allowed to show him. I don't know the family. This is, if you want to help me as an investigator, a private one and not officially. But I'm doing it seriously. It goes to both sides, and for me it was more interesting to understand the work of detectives and the security man. I'm not a lover of war. I'd rather never think about it. But it was better to have a good army than not. And it is better to have good ships, good shipbuilders and good vesselmen than not. And if you have good technicians with good airplanes, the same. And U-boats are very dangerous. I don't like them. And I had the chance to talk to the comrades who survived. I understood they were mostly from the dry lands, that there was much death, 40,000. Of course, the war was ugly with the U-boats, but it was war. It was a law, not the martial law. It is not the same. There had been a contracted law. Nevertheless, this is of detective interest. Not that I'm interested to find out why this was built. That's strange. I'm rather interested to understand why it was necessary to look at the building at all. Where is the possibility to do something to my parents? And it is really true. The only thing that was explained was there had been a war, and my father was not too much a friend of, rather not, of the Third Reich. And he was alone. Therefore, there had to be a separation between the human right topics and the normal goals of war. Therefore, it would never be allowed to put us on the side of spies or traitors. There had been after the war people who said those were spies for foreign nations, but in my case it was not. I asked, and my mother said, with your father, I don't know if he helped more than one side. It was custom to exchange information. But he was not doing that according to what my mother believed. But she was very cautious not to say yes or no. And this was with many things. This is my mother, the elder, in an officially amtliche Eintragung, officially passport. This was the time, and it was never given me as a drawing or something like this. It was by oral tradition. My mother explained me things. And where's the other mother, maybe? Yes, you can see her there. My mother was, for most of the time, the only security of my mother. She said that she was explained that a woman is not threatened by the soldiers. It was not the custom. But now I understand it was, of course, because too many were threatened by this or that or another side. And this was a conflict. I don't know if the so-called ordinary man still understands that there was much discussion and much conflict, many a conflict after the war, to assess the behavior of the leaders. And we were much separated from the rest, and there was some extra standing. And even that was not explained, but people were not talking openly about things, not necessarily urgently necessary. If it is not necessary, don't talk about the matters of family. But in this time, it had been that my mothers were still there. Papa was rather having an injury in his head. He was run over, and this was by 2 or 3 witnesses. But then, strange enough, it was contradicted. No, this was sad, but and Papa said nothing about it. Like having learned, it is rather more safe not to talk about it. And my mother said, they have possibilities to get at you. If you do, are those the victors, the allies? I don't know. Later, when having my experiences, I was allowed to travel alongside. And then I was myself having the possibility to put into practice myself this and that, and it was, and it still is, possible to ask others. It is the case that you're not alone. If you're working in a network, like in a diplomatic area, of course you can ask, or you are not a diplomat, or you are very alone, then you have no network and there's no diplomacy. Needed. If you have no network, you cannot do merchandise. Of course, you need a customer and you need someone to give you the goods to sell to others. And if that is necessary, you have contracts. But to get at the right result, there is negotiation, and there is then the understanding. And if it is on a larger scale, then there is diplomacy. And diplomats are there with their word, with a character, to guarantee as well. I don't know how much it is still the case. And this is like something I regard as an evidence. This car is strange. It is not the people, this is me. It is not the people that are that important. I can remember Mama was not too nice to me at that day. She was having expectations. And me, I was not having those shoes, I think. Rather strange things. Sometimes shoes were brought and then taken away, then they took it away. It was like me being on a photograph, and afterward, after the photograph, things were taken away. It was rather strange, and it was done not to get extra trouble. Really, I understood that. My mother was expecting better times. She was expecting better times, sorry. I'm not too much a stutterer, but this is something occurring from time to time, and I'm not laughing at it, but you learn to not take it too serious. Otherwise, you would have more difficulties. This is something my mother liked, maybe Mama as well. My mother said for the men it was not that important, but to honor my mothers, I put it as well, even as a headline, wo Treu und Liebe sich finden, wird wahrer Friede die Menschen verbinden. That was pedagogical, even for the adults. Those had leaders, and it is important that they are the right leaders. And internationally, there was looking for someone to administer the things. I'm still not knowing if it is my mother, mama, or... And then there were the childless. Because of the wartime, many were childless. And of course I could rather cry than laugh. What can you do about it? What can you do about it? There was someone who said, I'm now 80 years old, and others said I would start it nevertheless, but I'm not 80 years old. And people are still beginning to say too old, and this is of course ridiculous. My mother was starting, when she was giving birth to me, she was older than me. And she was having quite stress with it and planning. And this was for me. First she tried it with the other siblings, but it was not working out. I can't say if the siblings were not bonding to my mother. Most likely that was the case. But my mother was not saying, not hanging the cherries there and then asking, no, she was saying, it is important that you yourself wanted that your character is there. And I would not have taken alongside on the travels if I was not wanting, by my own character, to do the things. And there was testing all the time, and it was not good to have two good results. My mother said that not the people were then wanting to take you to do their work. And I knew that my mother was not wanting it. She was very much alone. And when you understand, the father was expected, and then there was heroes somewhere there, and I understood there was a Carl, a Carol. And then I came home and said, how many Carls are there? And my mother said there were brothers, but she said maybe all were for Carl. Alle für einen und einer für alle. Is that Carl? I think so. Carl was the chief, and he was having inside of the family, and it was a lifestyle. And then if I had done it myself, it would be good for everyone. But it is an old thing. This is for you to understand that then there was the war, and Karl was based in Bohemia. This was Austria. But Karl was in the hospital, I think, in the hospital in Breslau, in Wrocław. I don't know why it was important that maybe Pauline or even Santa Maria, no, Paula Maria, this was something that he was a chief, but I don't know what kind. And he was a leader, and he was having leaders as well. And this was quite a system. And then there was much death. And afterward, people had to look for a new start. And I met at least 2 or 3 who said, yes, we had quite a trouble. He was that strict. He was a controller, and then he was with a plane. He was coming at night, and we did not expect him, and he surprised us. That was detective work to look at the bases. And it was, of course, something where there was trust, and people were in honor, if being trustful. And I don't know how strict he had been, but I myself was asked as a boy, why don't you do it as your father did it? We need some work. You see, we have the sea, we have no work. And I was maybe 13 years old. I came home and said, those were not pleased. I visited, and I have no work for them. but I'm a pupil. I'm a student, and I wasn't even at that age. If it had been 5 years later, or earlier, me being born earlier, I could have done something, because my mother was still then able, or others. But then, 1985, it was nearly too late. But then I learned it is never too late, because the stock market is working nevertheless. But then someone said, no, it is not the stock market, it is something else. And I did not understand, was it in the East? There was the Iron Curtain, and it went that way as I do it. There was talk. This was something with the slave market. And there was then the idea to abolish the whole thing. And I don't know who exactly did it, but it was not pleasing to the family. It is not the whole tribe. It is a leading family. It had been a leading family with someone being in command, or not in command, but being like someone like the leading philosophical mind. And those were thinking about a time without slavery. Now we have it, there is not officially slavery, but people are then having no work, or no one to care for them. Therefore, of course, I'm not in favor of slavery, but being without someone to care for you, and I can't do anything because I'm not given something. And it is not that I expect it. My mother did, but she didn't expect it from there, but she said she had trusted the Deutsche Beamte. She was trusting in government. And then government was changing. There came then the officers from the eastern regions, and those had another thinking. It was then the thinking, we have to come through. Wir müssen unseren Weg finden. He was having own security. Sometimes I thought he was police, and then he was enforcer. But he was working with government, and he was even asked by government to help. But this is only a character. He was not looking that way. Maybe this was one of his chief men, but this is a symbol. This is something even more strange. This is Pauline or Santa Maria. No, Paula Maria. But this is not 100% sure. This came to mind because someone said those had a vessel, and Karl named it after his. This is not Karl. This is Karl is his father, and Karl then had to attend for him, to care for him. He was a caretaker, because Karl's injury was that difficult. If you had ever seen one, maybe a pilot with something left in his brain, some splinter, and then the strange behavior. It was not the same, but similar. And this I don't know if it is. This is in a movie, My Summer with a German Soldier. It was the idea to have something to remember the prisoner camps in the United States, therefore to learn from the past. And this is from another culture, a similar culture but different. I think this is Britain, the school uniform from there, but it is me there in the middle. I don't know why I was having that. Ein bisschen kleine Schüler, small pupils. Again, that this man was someone who had to travel to America. He was there before, but the base had been Breslau, not Bohemia, Breslau. And he was not pleased that people put him in Poland. But this countryside is now part of Poland. There's Breslau. There's Breslau. And I'm doing this, in part, this is Mama. Mama has a story hidden as well. In part I do it to explain why it was possible that there had been a resistance possible. It is not that you do it. You have to be trained to have something, not something, but a little bit more knowledge about security. And there were different methods to hinder the erosion of rightful behavior of government. Of course, it was difficult. There was the wartime, and there was pressure. And then there were enmity, and this enmity was taken advantage of. And it is important, those men had not been gypsies anymore. They were half, not more than half. I don't know how fast you grow into a Western type of man, but there was still good relationships to the travelsmen, not only gypsies, and gypsies are 100-fold. Therefore, do not misunderstand me. If you know gypsies, maybe those are totally different. And for me myself, the name gypsy is not negative. Zigeuner is not negative for me. For Russians, it sounds like a bug, and this, of course, then is not good. For me, it is first of all a travelsman, and a pirate. It sounds negative, and it is. But they were pirates a guarding force. Those were. It was a different time. I myself have not fully understood how to assess the whole thing. And this I showed before. This was Mummy for a day or two, and where Mama had been. This Mama, I don't know. And this was a time where there was not everything explained to a child, and I lived through it. If you're older, people will explain, but then there was no explanation. There was a different attitude. The attitude of the German officer of des Deutschen Beamten had changed. There was then, of course, the quality management as well. And in the quality management, there is then the description of your duties. And there is then even the possibility that you are not allowed to go into things not inside of the description of your process or of your standard. This is, if you want to get into touch with me, this is possible and important. If you know something, this was contract work. There had been first the contracts, and then to enforce it, there was military or policing needed, and then there was difficulties to pay the bill, and then there was the war in US. And my forefather, my own grandfather Karl, went there. He was very young. There must have been his father as well, or fathers. If there had been two brothers, there could have been cousins. But then, because of the war, there was then nearly no one left. Therefore, I do not want to ask people to be a military. If you think so, it is necessary. But I'm rather a diplomat. Of course, you need military and good training. This is not the point. But must say it that way because it is forbidden in this part of the world to do advertisement for military. And this is strange, but it is as it is. Please ask others. And of course, I'm not going into the idea to say negative things about military. It had been necessary. Those were a base, a main base, and there in Hamburg there had been a main base, and then there were main bases in France, and in other parts. This was recreation. There was in a sledge race, and I need proof that it was that case, that way. In this case, it was a sledge race where for girls. And then I declined to take the prize, to take the medal, because it was a race for girls. This is really true. I could say it in German, but as said, I myself sometimes heard it in very bad English or broken German, and then had to ask my mothers, mostly my mothers. Papa was not knowing too much. He was not saying too much about, but he must have been in USA, but he was not talking about it. And he was working. He was working. If someone asked for Papa, he is at work. Still at work? 7 p.m., yes. He might come back 8:30. When I was then a little bit older, I was still awake. And then Papa came and he raised 7 o'clock morning, and then he was working. This was done by an aunt, and she took over Mama's place. Therefore, I do not even know her name. This is my mother as well, with me, of course. And this is not too much important for me how I looked, but for others, they thought I was interesting child. They thought I was interesting. I don't know, maybe because of my birth. Possibly. This as well. This is really 2018. I was not falling off. I was not falling off the bicycle. It was that with the front wheel, I was running into something like a spur in eine Rinne. And then it gave the wrong direction for me to fall down. At this night time, I'm not having good English ability, but for you it is hopefully enough. And it's important that I'm not wanting to make a show out of it, because I'm not a showman. Not at all. I can do it. It was necessary. My mother said that they could present things, and some were better presenters or better actors than others. And this, of course, is a little bit ridiculous, but I asked for it. It is reenactment. My mother did it after the original walk. There was something like a decision time in the 60s, and I asked if those had another defense than the stick, and my mother said no. The police was saying, this is the only thing. If you feel threatened, stay at home. Please understand this hopefully is not the case till now, because if I'm threatened, I want to know by official entities if there is any threat, because my mother knew it. And she had inside knowledge. I myself have only the rumors, or the, not fairy tales, but the legends. My mother knew, my mother on the right, she knew the difficult personalities of the military man and the policeman and the foreign diplomats. And I was not said too much. It was a time where people were strict about telling or not telling. And it is important you understand there had been those diplomats and those businessmen, and it was not strictly separated. Sometimes One was a businessman, and he was doing it as well, and some was a diplomat and doing it as well in the business field. And this must have been the case with my mother. Those were no state clerks. It was private. I have not fully understood, and I was not said too much. I only learned that my mother said, "You will learn later." And then somehow I got the idea. It was in the 90s, in the early 90s. Someone, or quite a people, no, I don't think too many, but because I understood, those were interested, but not knowing it as well. And I'm now, because of the internet picture searching abilities, come to the point to understand who my mothers had been. Victoria Louise and Johanna Marina, and this is a shock. But it is also understanding that if you have no security, there is no reason to go after things. You can't do anything about it. People should already know. And then it is somewhere governed. I think so. And this is something of interest, but I don't know if there are any rights anymore. This was by the Empress, Augusta Victoria. She was having, I don't know if it was a duty or her own free decision. She wanted to put her effort into a nursing home for people who had developed disability in the head. And someone gave money for it. And there was the inauguration, and my mother said she had the allowance to decide what figures, children's, of animals, like bears, I don't know if there had been cats or other animals, and two of them. And this is still standing. This is actually a photograph from this or the other year. And this was done in honor. No, this was not in honor for this Wagner, for this Pennsylvania man, this Senator Wagner. This was like a charity of Augusta Victoria. And the inauguration must have been in 1910, around 1910. And I always thought, or 1905, this was strange. My mother must have been 2 years old, according to the official birth date. And this is a hint that she must have born before, in 1892. And therefore, my father, he was then really 35 years older, or even more, and he was trained to look younger, and he was trained to be a detective. But it was honorable. It was not something fishy. It was a diplomat, a detective diplomat. And he was trained to have the duty as well to negotiate. In German, also Unterverhandlungsbefugnis, müssen dabei gewesen sein. It was something, my mother said she was sometimes traveling along, and I don't know too much about it. And I was not shocked, but I thought this is strange. My mother had to ask if she were allowed to tell me things about the character of the diplomatic field during the Kaiser era. And she was allowed to explain me the outer circumstances, not the details. And this gave me then the idea it was really true, not only fairy tales, but she only explained me the outer circumstances, not the details. And the outer circumstances had been that there had been a woman's circle, a planning group, and my mother was there. And this is strange as well. My mother must have been born before the official birth date 1904. How can she be in such a circle if the war was over 1918? Then she was only 14 years old. This is in my so-called humble opinion not possible. Therefore, to get the idea she was born before gives you the idea there could be other differences as well. With my mother as well. My mother officially was born in the record 37, but she must have been 36. And then she was not dead because of her brain inflammation, but she was rescued out of hospital by my mother, who was doing detective work as a nurse. And this is important. This must have been on her own. And this could be then criminal. Of course, it is possible, but it is important. It was done later with the knowledge of others who had nothing to say about it, nothing negative. It was accepted to be necessary. But I don't know from what place. Yes, I heard people talk about that my mother rescued my mother from the hospital. But it was not said in what place or because someone wanted to let her die there. This was not said. She had ability to cure with alternative medicine. It was with vapors. But my mother said she was still having some head injuries, no, headaches because of it. And she said nothing more. There must have been opposition. Like, you are not pleasing us. And then my mother stopped asking to be the accepted. Yes, she was with a false DNA test. I myself know, not speculating. I think it was not right. But this is not, officially there's nothing. There's nothing. This is behind closed doors. I don't know nothing about it. And this is, of course, not right. And I do not want to be molested. I do not need any help except by the righteous. And if they are righteous, I need official documents. I'm not interested in behind closed doors anymore because there was that much damage. I think it was because of the idea. This was open and it is nothing, it is from the time. It is nothing of interest because of my mother and the family. It is on the sideline. This is me with my mother, and that is a collage because the adoration went to my father. But he himself was not wanting to be in the middle. It was the custom that others would then put to the front. One said to the other, oh, you can stand in the first row. It was some cultural understanding, like understatement, as we say in German. It is understatement if you do not applaud yourself. You rather give the honor to someone else. Of course, I now like to talk German, but I don't do it this time. This is, I showed you before, this is not Papa. I myself was not looking too much. I had rather a narrow vision field. I can remember I was there. Maybe I had slept before. Yes, it was sometimes I was sleeping, and then someone took me, and then there was a photograph. And there was not too much explanation. You might think they had been explaining in the circle of the family, but there was no time for it. There had work to be done, and later, from the age of 14 years old, there was a breaking up of the family. Not that we left each other, but it was that the other siblings, I think those are now rather biologically like nephews or niece, but I'm not 100% sure. I gave this finding to the government already, but I'm not in the least accepting any fast results. Because if that is in the record and that for long not right, this is on the sideline, not of too much interest, but this could be the actors who then took over a character my mother had started. This is possible. And this is of interest as well. This man had the idea, you can come to Canada and I will show you to work the stock market. And only because he's a stockbroker, he is no rich man. He is doing it as an administrator for others. This I already understood, but not too much about stock marketing. He then had Bloomberg to be founded. Therefore, he must have been some man with influence, and he had in some regard taken over things for Jack Benny. And Mr. Jack Benny, he was a respected man from Breslau. He was, when being asked and in the right mood, with respect, talking about the time when the boys were raised. But it was a time where there was demand. It was strict, and it was training. Therefore, I was always glad that it had been before my days. At least half of them were not living anymore. And not because of natural death, natural causes. This is my mother, and she was always in the expectation, this is Mama. Mama said, maybe the people are not giving it, or those are promising things like Luftschlösser, like something in the air, in thin air, and then they give you something like prerequisites, like extra demands, and then at the end you pay for it. My mother was, she was not believing that people were, especially merchants, were too honest. And I myself understood, if my father had been there, he would have had men to guard that whole process. And to guard something is to be there as a witness, but it is there to guard the whole process, like delivering goods, like having your own shipping yards or harbors, and your own lines, like the railway lines, and it was fairy tales that there were even own telegraph lines. But I don't know how large that had been, and I don't know whose money was working there. Therefore, it was disguised for security reasons, but I understand there must have been something, because people, this is 1979, because people were talking about it, like expecting something from me. Why was I not doing something that there's work. And I had pocket money. I had an allowance, 20 D-Mark, 20 Mark. And this is of course true. And it was not that my parents were wanted to give me more. Papa had sometimes only 50 Mark, and he was the adult in his pocket. And this is true. There was no tight-fisted people, but not enough money to raise a family. And my mother was not to go to the office. This was no idea, no chance. But I'm now doing it, and I'm understanding why my mother hadn't done it. Because your whole name is then somehow scratched. And I could explain, but people are not wanting excuses, and me myself, I do not want to have the idea to look for excuses, but it's necessary to explain. Those Indians felt being tricked as well. And it is really true that the times were growing negative for them. And I myself was there when there was negotiation about extra place. But there is not the possibility to expect something from me outside the rightful explaining of grounds. I need grounds to build on, and this is not new. And they had been asking, but whom to ask as the first question. Papa, he was rather someone caring for the family, but he was not having the ability. Not the ability to go lawful against the tricks. And I myself am not having it. My mother was relying on the German officer. And that is one problem. There is the British officer, and there is the American officer, and the Russian officer. I think this is not of interest. I'm not interested in it, not too much, on the sideline. On the sideline, and why Kaiser? Kaiser? Auguste Donata was guarding most of the possession. And there had been then contracts who would get what, and I don't know too much about it. If there had been some distribution, it is not there. And don't know. There's more naturally, if to be expected from Hanover, but from Braunschweig, Lüneburg. But if it is not there, it isn't there. But if it is some error of the officer, of the officers, what can you do about it? This is the old telegraph line net, and it is something that had been private, but who owns it? I don't know. And I'm not taking it lightly. It is something, a habit, no, not a habit. Sarcasm. What can you do about it? This was a time where it was good for me not to think about the honestness of the bankers, or the honestness or the reliability of others, but it was my parents being strong enough to give me what I needed. And you cannot go to a bank and demand what is yours if you cannot even say the real names of the mothers. Therefore, that is one of the problems, and it is something I expect, of course, the different governments to tell me what they already know, and not behind my back, because that is never to be accepted. I never had gone after the idea, and there had been so-called religious people who think about being the Pope or the Bishop, and think about it. I now come to the result that first of all I need the acceptance that something went wrong. Something went wrong. And there is not the necessity that I am some athlete or some extraordinary. It is human rights to know about your ancestry. And it's human rights that you do not go into contract you did not sign yourself. And I'm not wanting to be in a special, narrowed diplomatic corps. The people asked me, and now I understand it was a trick, to put me on one side or the other. It is a trick. I'm having my own corps without any members. This would be the solution. If you don't have it, the starting money, you cannot build something. And I couldn't. With 20 mark in your pocket, it is not possible. There was the asking when I was at that age, 15 years old, why don't you have friends? And I said, if friends come to my house, then they want to have something to drink and something to eat. And we only had very few things at hand. And this is true. Therefore, the first thing to understand, it was a hard time after the war, but then it was better, technically, but it was not put into place. And you cannot ask someone because no one is responsible. Therefore, I need someone who is responsible to answer my questions. And since when do I know? This is not America. No. The first one to answer my questions, this must have been someone responsible for this time. The Allied had a bureau. But was it for civil affairs as well? I think it would then be Bonn. But this is a single case. Or is it, no, not Poland? I don't think so. There's something in Geneva as well, then it would be Switzerland. And this is the problem, where to start. Please give me some idea. It is someone who is not sided, who is able to think without being on one side or the other. The United States are too far away. There had been a stock market, and of course there had been a main base, I think so, but it must have been Europe as well. But then I'm asking, why was there then the saying that Karl was self-reliant, and that was his problem? This was a short commentary. Karl was self-reliant, and that was his problem. He could not pay the doctors, and some else said he could have done so, but there was no doctor anymore. The doctor had to come from far away to open the skull, and to disinfect. Therefore, Karl died in 1935. And there must have been the freezing of his income. But I cannot explain why someone else said there's a bank in the United States. How come? If there's a bank, you still have liquid money. I don't understand. There is the lacking of diplomacy to have a look into it. The United Nations should do so, but is it possible that there's a look into a thing without a fast solution? Because I'm understanding Karl wanted to have land. This was another commentary or another asking, and people did not know if he was getting some. This was not published. And then he was still having people traveling in his name. He is of more interest than but my mother said, no, this is, in her opinion, it was too dangerous. My mother said, I'm having myself enough. And I said, I'm not seeing this, not seeing one or the other. Only fairy tales. I started to talk that way. I'm only getting in contact with fairy tales. Even Mama then started, she was saying she was sponsoring 7 clubs, 7 Vereine, caring for disabled children. But how can you give those companies, those private companies, money if you do not have enough money to let me go to university? And this really is true. There had been much believing in the German officer or the international honest officer man. One man or many men, of course, many. You need a whole system. And if there is no detective, there is no finding. And therefore I need something. The whole family is that quiet about it. I'm thinking about the idea that there is really a large distance, biologically as well, between me and the siblings. I'm now feeling like being raised with half strangers, and I do not like the idea at all. I'm not liking the idea at all. This is PayPal Me BRESLAU-FRIENDS, and there you have the links to the movies. The domains are not being paid anymore, because if there is no income you cannot pay it, and maybe there is switching off of currency. And this is not in the idea of those who wanted to have something. It wasn't that big. I cannot say as big as before, not as big as before. It wasn't that big. It was a network. The expectation into a revival is dangerous. If you expect it, then you are not able to do it without being disturbed. But this I cannot change. I got the idea in the 90s, in the 1990s, that when I started asking, there was already the word about it. I was asking in Australia. I was traveling privately with sponsored miles and more given to me. But not more than that. You cannot do that too long. And it was to help others. And there was like a special, I was not in any group. It was private. to look into things. I don't know who gave me the miles and more. I don't know. It was not from myself, from my own acquaintances. It was by my mother. I think she gave me the address, or by Mama. And those were quite old acquaintances, not even good friends. And then people thought I would have my own fellow students, and we could do something, but I was already understanding I was special. Not special, stupid or sick, but my whole calling in life was special. I'm the boy of all timers. It was like me being born in the 70s with the ideas of 100 years before. Do it for the honor of your forefathers. This is not normal behavior in Europe. And I'm not doing it for my forefathers, but I'm now understanding there is something, it is in my thinking, there is something to follow, some goal. There must be still something with it. But the answer to give me molestation, an unwanted and unnecessary molestation by state guardians or something like it, I will, of course, reject. I could explain it in German, but I don't do it this time. It is for you to think about it. There's something, and it is strange. The whole matter of nobility isn't that of interest, because nobility is there, and then it is no longer doing the own administration, or is it? And then in this part of the world, it is not even being allowed to be called a king or a duke. Therefore, it is then like for the movies. I would rather think what kind of queen or king is it? Is it apple king or Wein, in German Weinkönig, also Weinkönig gibt es ja so nicht. It is not possible to think about any of any reason to be called a king or queen, because with me there's administration alongside, and my grandfather, he had been a travelsman, and he was most of the time undercover. But it was known that he was a boss. I don't know if he was the boss. And I know, because of the questions and the questions like, why are you not giving us? And this was not only one time. And then I understood this is not something my mother knew about. It was indirectly asked me by others, and those were then not people who told me. If it is against their own interest, they won't tell me. It is only a remark, not even a commentary, a remark. Therefore, this is asking for your support. Thank you very much. This is 11th November 2024. My name is Friedrich, and this is strange. I'm feeling molested again, and those are my two mothers. And this is someone who was called aunt, but I'm now understanding she is not inside of the line, even if it is thought she could be, thought about that way. And I'm wondering what others knew about it. No one is giving any, not even remarks. And this is really true. I'm telephoning, and I'm quite shocked. People play the game, or you are thinking strange things. But why then the asking from Arab countries, if no one knows anything in the immediate so-called family? Even the so-called was not known before. It was a working model no one thought about. It was for the working idea only. But now, having the internet findings, I'm quite sure I found a thing that is not changing the whole history. This not. But it is giving me the idea that the possibilities are misused. Maybe. Hopefully not, but it looks that way.